那我们今天非常高兴呢，就是请到 Vanderbilt University 的 Owen McGuinness 老师来长庚大学跟大家做这一场非常有趣的科普演讲。好，那Vanderbilt 大家应该有点印象吧？所以大家都修过那个科学人文社会观。我提到其实呢，我是从2001年到2007年，我是在 Vanderbilt 大学任教。那 Dr. McGuinness 呢跟我是同事，那时候我就知道 Dr. McGuinness 研究一级棒，教学更是一级棒，所以非常高兴呢，这次有机会呢，请 Dr. McGuinness 到长庚大学来跟大家做一个非常有趣的科普演讲。那之前呢，先简单跟大家介绍一下那个 Dr. McGuinness。Dr. McGuinness 呢是1978年在纽约州立大学的实习分校State University of New York at Stony Brook。拿到他 biology 的学士学位，然后呢，他在83年拿到他的PhD， 他是在纽奥良，就是 Louisiana State University School of Medicine 拿到身体学的博士，所以他的专长是身体学。那之后呢，他在那边做了1年的 postdoc 之后呢，他就到了 Vanderbilt， 就是在美国田纳西州 Nashville 的 Vanderbilt University 呢做 postdoc。所以之后呢，他就一直留在 Vanderbilt。他的 career 呢就是从 postdoc， 然后到 assistant professor、associate professor 到 full professor。所以他的整个 career 呢都是在 Vanderbilt 发展的。那Dr. McGuinness 呢，他目前呢除了有很多 title， 那比较重要的是，他目前是这个 Vanderbilt Mouse Metabolic Phenotyping Center， 就是小鼠代谢研究中心的 associate director 副主任。那他同时呢，也是 Vanderbilt Diabetes Research and Training Center， 在美国是一个非常有名研究糖尿病中心的一个之一，他也是 Associate Director， 他目前就是这2个非常重要单位的 Associate Director。那 Dr. McGuinness 呢，他在这么多年来在 Vanderbilt 呢，他有2个非常重要的成就，一个是他的研究，Dr. McGuinness 他的研究呢，主要就是其实标题跟今天标题很像。他主要研究就是在 nutrition、infection 跟 hepatic glucose metabolism， 这3个算是关键字，所以 Dr. McGuinness 从几十年来就在这个领域做了非常多非常关键的研究，那跟大家提到他已经得到了不少的奖，包括美国心脏协会的研究奖，还有国际小儿糖尿病基金会的研究奖，他的研究做得非常的杰出。另外一个很特别的例子跟大家讲一下，就是像我们每个老师都要写研究计划案，在美国也是一样。那 Dr. McGuinness 呢，他有一个研究计划案，那个名字呢叫做 Nutrition, Infection and Hepatic Carbohydrate Metabolism。这个研究计划案从1992年开始到现在没有停过。这代表什么意思？就是 Dr. McGuinness 在这方面是专家中的专家。所以呢，他能够跟美国的 NIH 申请计划案，从1992年到现在20几年的时间没有中断过，就代表说他的研究非常的杰出。这个在美国非常难得哦。你可以有10几个研究计划案，那个没什么了不起。可是你一个研究计划案，你都让它不断的延续下去，这个是非常重大的研究成就。就像现在美国的话，你的研究计划案，也许你100个研究计划案，政府只会给6个研究计划案研究经费。这么难的申请研究经费的状况之下呢 ，Dr. McGuinness 他可以这个研究计划案延续20几年不中断。这个代表说他在这个领域真的是专家中的专家。所以呢，我们非常高兴今天请 Dr. McGuinness 来跟大家分享在他这方面的研究经验。那研究是其一，更重要的是他还是一个非常好的老师，他在美国 Vanderbilt 呢得到非常多的教学奖，包括教医学生、教研究生、教博后，他都得到各种不同的教学奖项。那现在呢 ，Dr. McGuinness 就更进一步，他教其他的科学家，所以 Dr. McGuinness 在 Vanderbilt 呢有非常多的工作坊。就教世界各地来的科学家，教他们怎么样做动物实验，然后教他们怎么做代谢方面的研究。 所以今天呢，同学非常幸运有机会第一手接触到 Dr. McGuinness 他的教学的魅力他教学魅力之一呢，就是要跟同学互动，所以请同学待会儿呢要注意听 Dr. McGuinness 的演讲，因为他在过程当中会随时与同学做互动。OK， 好，那花了这么多时间呢，主要是让大家知道说，这是一个非常难得的机会。我们待会儿结束之后呢会有 Q&A， 所以希望同学也把握机会。不管是对 Dr. McGuinness 的研究，或对 Vanderbilt 这个学校有任何疑问的话，都可以跟 Dr. McGuinness 提问。Okay, so that's a little bit too long introduction, but I just want to make sure that everybody understand it's a pleasure that we have today's speaker to give us this popular science talk. I eat like a mouse, why don't I look like one? So let's welcome Dr. McGuinness for this talk. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you very much. I understand all of you love science, or think you love science, but you hate exams. I hate them. So I have a few exam questions today for you. They're really tough, all right? So I hope that you'll answer a few of them. Do not be afraid to raise your hand and guess, even if you're not sure, because this is an interactive audience, and I love animation. So if you get it right, it's okay to raise your hand and go, yes, I got it. All right? So let's get started. So let's start off with the headlines. In June of this year, in Taiwan News, do you know what the headline was? Taiwan remains most overweight Asian country despite increase in exercise. So, that's our problem. This is our problem, the problem of the world. We have problem of women and men gaining weight since 1970, and they keep getting bigger and bigger. Okay? And it happens in every country, and every developed country, including yours. That is the reality. So let's do a comparison between the country I live in and the country you live in. So in this graph, we have obesity and diabetes. In 2010, about 34% of women were considered overweight, obese. If you compare it to Taiwan, it was about 7%. Yes, sounds great. Look at women, men, 32%, 5%. Taiwan, 2010 looks great. Now let's look at diabetes. In the US, 6% and 7.9% of those people had diabetes. Look at Taiwan, 5.9, 7.5%. So it means you're already starting behind the curve and even haven't gained weight yet. So Asian populations as a population are at greater risk for having diabetes when they gain weight. That's a problem. That is the genetics of the problem. And when we do projections for what can happen down in 2025, we look at the data. This is what education and all the things we as a society are trying to do to discourage people from gaining weight. And we're projected, and this little figure over here will tell you the probability of preventing a rise in these things. It says obesity in the US, no matter what we tell people to do, still gain weight. It's still going to happen. It's not a whole lot better in your country either. People don't listen. Okay? Now look at diabetes. About 30% chance of curbing the rise. Maybe a little bit better here. So we have a challenge here. We have a problem of being overweight. All right? And with that overweight comes an increase in risk of diabetes. So what is diabetes? Well, there are actually a whole bunch of flavors, but there are three that are most common in the world. The first is what we call type 1 diabetes. And generally it occurs in people your age or younger. That's when the incidence is most high. But if people have diabetes, it's a small percentage of the population. Type 2 diabetes, which is most associated with being overweight, occurs generally later in life, usually in your 40s and 50s, although in this generation is occurring at a younger age, all right? And occurs about 95% of people who have diabetes have this kind of diabetes. And there's another kind of diabetes that occurs if you're a woman who is pregnant. You have a risk of having diabetes, increased risk of diabetes during pregnancy. It's called gestational diabetes. That occurs while you're pregnant, and it affects about 9% of babies. So why don't we want hyperglycemia in your mom or your mom when you were pregnant, when they were pregnant? What's the problem? Who's not going to be happy? Who's not going to be healthy? Anyone know the answer? The baby. So when the mother's blood sugar is high during pregnancy, that affects the growth of the baby, and the baby comes out much bigger and has lots of complications. So as a clinician, I'm not one, they worry about screening for high blood sugar during pregnancy to protect the baby during that pregnancy, so we screen for it. So what is a normal blood sugar? We call normal a blood sugar less than 110 milligrams per deciliter. It's just a number. You can memorize that number. If the blood sugar is a little high, 110 to 126, we call that impaired glucose tolerance. It just means a little higher than normal, but you're not diabetic. All right? Or if the blood sugar is over 126, some magic number, all of a sudden we call you being diabetic. Where are these magic numbers? What do we call normal? Why do we say something is normal? Are you normal if you're 5'5" versus 5'8"? What's normal? Well, the reason why we know normal is because we know what abnormal is. What we have plotted here is fasting blood sugars, different blood sugars, in people that were treated for diabetes. About 25 years ago, people used to say, the blood sugar's high, as long as you're not sick in the hospital, we're not going to worry about it, we'll just let it stay high, it's not going to hurt you. But what they found was that long-term diabetes causes blindness, amputations, heart attacks, strokes, lots of problems later in life. And so the physicians wanted to know, if I control your blood sugar really well, will that help? And how well should I control your blood sugar? And what they found is that when the blood sugars are in this range, in the normal range that we define, there's no eye disease. That's one of the side effects of kidneys. And all of a sudden, when the blood sugar is a little high, all of a sudden you start people having problems with eye disease. So what this simply says is my blood sugar is in the normal range. We define normal as being below this magic number 126. My risk of having complications from diabetes are kept low. So therefore, that's why we control 126 as being abnormal if it's too high. So the idea of being normal or abnormal is based on negative clinical outcomes, not whether 126 is a magic number. All right. So our population, the world's population, is getting obese. Look at all the things that can go wrong when you're overweight. And you don't even have diabetes. You just have all these other things. Problems with your insulin, we'll talk about in a little bit. Risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, lipid levels all messed up, which affects your ability to have a stroke and other things like that. Cardiovascular disease. That's what causes amputations and high blood pressure. Strokes. and then problems sleeping, and lots of other things you probably never even heard of before, okay, that can happen to you. So being overweight is a problem. So what I want to talk about today is, why do I gain weight, and am I really a mouse? Or why am I not? So let's start off. Does anyone know who this person is? All right. He used to play basketball. Okay. He's 141 kilograms, 2.29 meters. I work in a mouse metabolic phenotyping center. We study metabolism in mice, but we try to translate information learned in the mouse to understand human physiology. We study animals that look about this size, 0.025 kilograms, or about a tenth of a meter long. They're really long. No, they're really small. But some people think they're really cute. My wife does not like to see mice in her house, and when they're in, she screams. Okay? So, but we have lots of mice in my lab. Right? So, but if I were a mouse, I'd probably make a comment like this. Gosh, my whole family could live in his shoe. His shoe is really big. And the whole family of mice, maybe 10 or 20 of them, and they could live in his shoe. So when we think about mice, are they really small humans? So what I'm going to talk about today is, how much do I really need to eat? How much does that compare to us and what they really need to eat? What do we do with what we eat? Where's the glucose go that we're worried about if it gets too high when we're diabetic? And then I'll talk at the very end about disease and how it affects how insulin works. So let's start off with the first question of the day. You're a 30-year-old female, weigh about 130 pounds, about 60 kilos, about 5'4". Just a little bit overweight, but not much. Okay? How many calories a day do you think you'd need to be weight stable? About 1,000 calories a day. 1,000 to 1,700 calories a day, 1,700 to 2,500, or 2,500 to a calorie. How many think it's A? Raise your hand. Ooh, we see no. How about B? Okay, about a third of you. C? About a third. D? Okay, oh, we have one outlier here. Well, the answer is B, between 1,000 and 1,700. I put a big range here because the reality is it's a big range. So if I were your age 35 years ago, I could never answer this question. How do you know what that number should be about? How do you guys know? Where did that number come from? Is it published on anything that you see? How about the side of a cereal box? How about, you've heard of calories before? That was never in anything when I was your age. It didn't exist on those boxes. You've been educated, you've been taught what a calorie is, even though you haven't realized it. My generation was never taught this. You have a sense of what a calorie is. And why do we worry about it? Because we saw an obesity epidemic that we caused, my generation. We're the product of the obesity epidemic. All right, I want people I'd ask this question. All right, how many calories are in this food? All right, so we got a quarter pounder with cheese, medium world fries, and a large Coke. Now, has anyone ever had this meal before in this room? Or something similar to it? Admit to it, I have. How many times have I had extras on the drink before I walk out the door and top it off? Okay, so that's what we do. Okay, so for this woman, how many meals could they have in a day to meet the caloric demands of a day? Half of that? Full one? 2 of them? 3? Or maybe even 4 in one day. That would be enough they need for one day. All right, let's think about it for a minute. Let's figure this one out. How many think they only have half of what's on the plate? Anyone? Oh, one person. Couple. Okay, one. You can have one. Oh, about a third of you. Two. Oh, about another third. Three. About four. Oh, come on. Right. The answer is about one. Okay? A quarter pounder has about 650 calories. Large fries about 490. A large Coke's about 290. That's 1,400 calories. That is enough calories to meet most adults' one-day requirement if they're not training for a marathon. Okay? So, remember the headline on the Taiwan News was, "But I exercise." All right. So, typical recommendation now is to go for a nice little walk at the end of the day. Right? So, 1.5 mile walk. About how many calories would you burn if you went for a 1.5 mile walk? About 2.4 kilos, the kilometers. How many calories do you think you burn? Less than 100? Between 100 and 200 calories? 200 to 300 or greater than 300? Let's go with less than 100. Who thinks it's less than 100? A few of you. Between 1 and 200. Right? It's about a third of you. 200 to 300. Only one. Okay. 400? Oh, greater than 300. Okay. So, the answer is between 1 and 200, and the number varies depending on how hard you run and stuff like that, and how hard you walk, whether you're a walker like taking your time, or whether you're a purposeful walker and walk like using your arms and legs and really getting into it. All right. But the reality is we actually can measure how many calories you burn in a day. We can put you in a box, a really big box, about the size of probably an office, okay? And it's a specially designed box that you get trapped in for at least 24 hours. So you had a big exam tomorrow morning, you could live in there and study overnight. It has a bed, chair, computer, video games, okay? So not too bad. But it also has on the bottom, it has a force platform that can sense every motion that you make and sense your movement and calculate how much work you're doing every time you move. So if you're a person who does this all day, it'll know that you're doing that all day. Okay? If you're a person who just likes to lay their head and not study and just crash, but they also can sense that you're typing on the computer really nervously. Okay? Unfortunately, it also measures all the outs, all right? So it measures what comes out of your body, so it knows how many things that you eat, and it also measures what leaves. The thing is that these chambers are specifically designed to measure what you do, which is to breathe and exhale. You inhale air that has oxygen in it and consume it. And then what do you produce when you burn things? You produce carbon dioxide, CO2. So it has sensors in this box that measure how much oxygen is consumed by your body and how much carbon dioxide is produced by your body. It now has measures of activity of that person when you're in that box. And it measures all your unique behaviors. So if you have some bad habits, we're going to find out about it. Okay, so what this machine is doing is measuring your energy expenditure indirectly by measuring how much oxygen is consumed and how much carbon dioxide is produced using this very simple equation. It says that when you burn something, you consume oxygen, produce carbon dioxide and water. And what essentially this machine does is just simply say, we know this equation exists for everything that gets burned. If we can measure how much oxygen and CO2 balance there is, we can calculate how many calories are burned. And that's what basically we do. We call it indirect calorimetry, because if it were direct, we'd actually measure how much heat was produced by your body. We're doing it indirectly because we're actually measuring what you're being burned. All right, and this is what the data would look like. The green line represents your energy expenditure in a 24-hour cycle. Notice that it's not a flat line. Why? Because this is daytime, and so you're active in doing stuff, so you get up and stand and move around, so bounces all over the place. At night, how many here are night owls? All right, most of you go to bed at about 9 o'clock. How about 11 o'clock?
No.
1 o'clock? Is that, you just starting your day at 1 o'clock? Okay, how many people think 8 in the morning is nighttime? How many think 10 in the morning is still nighttime? I'm still sleeping. So some of you are night owls, and some of you are morning people. I'm a morning person. I was home my whole life. But I've met a few people who are purely night owls, including my daughter. All right? My daughter, who's much older than you, she could sleep till 1 o'clock in the afternoon and not even blink an eye. All right? But stay up till 2 in the morning and not even think. So the reality is we're all different. We all have different patterns. But the most important thing is that we should get a good night's sleep. However you define night in your thing. But you need sleep. Notice that on this graph, the red bars represent that little force platform, the guy moving around on there. That's measuring the movement. So every time they move, there's a little blip in the energy expenditure representing them moving around. And so we can look at that data and calculate area under the curve for energy expenditure for this person. And if you kind of look over here in this bar graph, most of you, if this is 24-hour energy expenditure, the height of this graph, it has 3 components that determine that energy expenditure. Your resting metabolic rate, that is the rate if you were to sit on a bed, not fall asleep, but just hang out, not doing anything. And notice that most of your energy that your body needs is from doing nothing, just existing, just breathing, just thinking, not physically doing anything. Yet things are happening, all right? That's what we call the resting metabolic rate. And then, every time you eat, there's an increase in metabolic rate. So what's your favorite time of the year to eat a lot of food? How about every day? No. They must have a big holiday where you eat lots of food at a family event. What is that? Christmas time? That's one big, another big event. Christmas birthday parties. So you can put down the calories. Okay, every time you eat food, you burn extra calories. And when you really eat too much, and it's a warm day, what do you start doing? You start sweating. I feel hot. And all it is that taking in food, large quantities of food, actually you burn calories to store it for the time when you're not eating food. And so that creates heat. So that's why you're sweating. That's about 15% of your daily energy expenditure, just eating food and storing it for tomorrow. Okay? And then we have physical activity, the things you try to avoid. And remember, the Taiwan News said it wasn't good enough to help you lose some weight. All right? It's a small fret. So physical activity, just moving around, is a small component of total energy expenditure. And that's why the Taiwan News says, I exercise, but it doesn't help. I'm still stuck with these 20 pounds I don't want. So let's get back to mice, because that's what I study mice. Metabolic rates in a human are between 20 and 24 kilocalories per kilogram per day. This number is really an average number, because every one of you will have different requirements every single day of the week. Because some days you go to the gym and lift weights and do lots of stuff, and other days you simply study and basically do a brain dead studying, and you're not burning a whole lot of calories, although your brain is working. All right? But that's a range to give you a sense of what number is. But look at the mouse. 300 kilocalories per kilogram per day. Man, they go in fat. That's 15 times higher than a human. So, let's get back to our basketball player. Given his size, the equivalent of 24 kilocalories per kilogram per minute is about 2.5 McDonald's per day. So when he is not playing ball, which he's not playing anymore, he would be allowed, even though he's a big guy, to have 2.5 Big Mac meals a day. That's his allotment, period, to meet his metabolic demands. Now, granted, if he was playing ball, he'd probably need 4 times that. Okay? But in his normal life now, but if you were a mouse, and the mouse were as big as him, you get to eat 29 Mac meals a day, and he barely meet his metabolic demands. That gives you a sense of how much he can eat. So the mouse metabolically has a big demand for food because his metabolic rate is really, really high. The way you can think of it is, the mouse is like a human all the time running on a treadmill 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what a mouse is. High metabolic rate. Therefore, it's really hard to make a mouse fat. You have to really feed them. All right? And we give them really high-fat diets to make them robust and fat. And they eat it as fast as they can. Because they love it, just like we love really good tasting food. So I want to talk a little bit about where those calories go, where all that energy goes. So, an equation. I'm so sorry. All right. We have a fuel we eat. We take some oxygen, produce carbon dioxide, and we generate heat. That's the final common pathway. Heat for everything. Okay? But that fuel is used to fuel a production of energy, ATP. That ATP is then used to drive the metabolic process. Work, cellular work, physical work, all types of work. Let's think about cell ATP energy demand. If you take a little cell on a petri dish and ask, how are you staying alive? It's staying alive because there's a little enzyme called sodium potassium ATPase that says, in that cell culture medium, there's sodium in that medium, and that pump is saying, sodium, you stay out. Potassium, you stay in. And sodium wants to come in, the potassium wants to get out, and it's going, no, you can't. And it burns energy just to keep them separate. That requires a lot of energy by the cell. Why does it do that? It creates these gradients, then uses them to actually move molecules across the plasma membrane, like sugars, like electrical events. It uses these gradients, these concentration gradients, to fuel other things that cell wants to do. But it also uses energy to make things. Every time a cell divides, it needs to make lipid to build more membranes. It needs to make sugars from synthetic pathways. It needs to make proteins to build big cells. And it also needs to make membranes and move molecules between the cells. All movement requires energy, just like you walking down the block requires energy. It's all happening in the cell and you can't see it, but it requires a lot of energy to do so. And of course, then there's the physical work that you and I see, which is the heart pumping and the muscle contracting. So, if we think about skeletal muscle, we have quite a bit of it in our body. How much of that basal metabolic rate that we have is feeding skeletal muscle? Is it a big number or a little number? Right? Is it about 10% of our metabolic rate, 10 to 15, 16 to 25, 25 to 50, or a lot higher, much higher than 50%? Let's just make it simple. How many think it's A and B in that range? Anyone think C? How about D? Okay, committed. How about E? Oh, we have one person who thinks E. Okay, well the answer is about D. So we have a lot of skeletal muscle,
But actually, at a metabolic rate, it's actually pretty low. What we have plotted here are 5 major tissues. You have the brain, kidney, liver, heart, muscle. These numbers are kilocalories per gram weight of the tissue per unit time. So who's the highest? The kidney and the heart. Why are they so high metabolically per size of the tissue? Because the heart is pumping. It's pumping your blood. It's a muscle. It's always working. So it has a high metabolic demand, but its percent contribution to the whole body metabolism is small because it's a small organ. All right? But it's very energy requirement. Look at the kidney. It requires a lot of energy. Why do you think the kidney requires a lot of energy? What does it do? It concentrates your urine. So for example, if you go in and decided, I'm going to skip water, I'm not going to drink any water today. What happens to urine? It gets dark, right? And then you don't go to the bathroom, right? Because you're not drinking. So what the kidney's doing is concentrating urine. It's saving every bit of salt that's in your body so it doesn't leak, trying to keep your blood pressure normal. And in doing that requires a lot of energy. That sodium potassium ATPase is working overtime trying to concentrate the urine. Very demanding process. Yet it too is a relatively small organ. Skeletal muscle, there's a lot of it, but its metabolic rate is low because in a resting metabolic rate, you're not really using it. If you go to run down the block, then you can use it. So its metabolic rate is low, but we have a lot of it. All right, so it adds up to a significant fraction, but it can be much, much higher if you're playing basketball, or playing soccer, or playing football, or some other contact sport, or dancing for that. So this idea that tissues require energy means we have to feed that energy. And like any energetic process, if we want to be in a steady state, in must equal out. In being what we eat, the McDonald's and other foods that we like to eat, and out is what we metabolically demand. And energy balance just follows the first law of thermodynamics. Well, we don't change. So to understand obesity, we need to understand what obesity is. Obesity is the gaining of fat, adipose tissue in our body. So fat is made of a lipid. So if you have about an extra pound of fat in your body, how many calories are in that pound of fat? About 1,000? Maybe 2,000. How about 2,500 or 3,000 or 3,500 or 4,000? So in 1 pound of fat that you're trying to get rid of, how many calories are in that? So how many think it's between A and B, less than 2,000? How many think it's about 3,000? How many think it's about 3,500? Couple. How many think it's 4,000? How many don't want to think? That's what I say. Okay? I don't want to guess. Well, the answer is about 3,500 calories. Let's think about that 3,500. Is that a big number or a little number? How many calories a day did that 30-year-old woman need per day to meet their metabolic demands? About 1,700, 1,800. So that's 2 days of fuel in that 1 pound of fat. 2 days of not eating, all right, for 1 pound of fat. So once you gain it, it's really hard to lose because it's got a lot packed in there of energy. Right, so here's a quiz question. So someone put you in that metabolic chamber and figured out that you needed 2,000 calories a day. Let's just assume that's true. And then they told you, go home tomorrow, and I'm going to give you 2,000, and then over the course of the week, I'm going to give you an extra 1,750 calories. That's half of 3,500 if you haven't figured it out. Okay? At the end of the week, how much weight would you gain? So add an extra 1,700 calories. Would you gain a little less than a half a pound, assuming the machine was right, about a half a pound, or greater than a half a pound? So think it's egg. How many think it's B? How many think it's C? How many people think they would lose weight? All right, well the answer is it's about 1/2 pound in a week. Because it's mass balance. In is equal to out. If you take an extra 1,700 calories on board, and you only need, it's extra, it's got to go somewhere, it's going to get stored, so you'll gain about the equivalent of 1,700 calories of weight, which is about 1/2 pound. However, okay, so now, if you continued for the next year to overeat, what would happen? Would you wait, just keep going up forever? Would you wait, stop rising after the first week or so? And then even though you were overeating, it stopped rising, so you're somehow protected. Or would it plateau by the end of the year? Okay, who thinks that it would continue to eat as long as you overate, keep going up forever? We have one person, okay? Stop rising after the first week or so. How many think you'll go up but plateau by the end of the year? Okay, can anyone give me an idea of why you think it might plateau? What does plateau mean? If you're eating calories, extra calories, but your weight is not changing after a period of time, but you're still eating those calories, what must have happened to energy expenditure? You're eating extra, all right, what you calculated, but your weight is not increasing anymore. What must have demand have done? Must have gone up, right? Because your weight is stable, your is equal out. So when you look at a person who's overweight, most people don't gain weight yesterday. Most people gain weight over a course of a lifetime. Basically, a few extra meals every week over the course of 20 years. 5 pounds a year is the typical ballpark number. You can't see it, it's very insidious. Very small effects, but they build up and it's hard to lose them. All right? And the reason why it plateaus is because you have to carry that weight. Every time you move down the block, every time you have to do something, you have to move that weight because you now weigh more. So you burn more because you're overweight. So when you're eating those extra 1,700 calories, at first you gain a little weight, but the 1,700 calories is still more than what that extra burning required to move that weight, so you gain a little more. But then what happens is as you gain that weight, you have to stand up, and what happens to your muscles in your legs? They get stronger and bigger. So people who are overweight, if you ask a surgeon who works on people who are overweight, they say these people's thighs are huge, and it's not because of fat. Their muscles are huge because they have to support that weight. They have to carry that weight. It's like wearing a backpack all the time. And so that's why their weight plateaus, is because their metabolic demand went up because they gained the weight. But they're stuck at that high weight because they are eating extra calories that were there. And the only way you lose that weight is to stop eating that extra calories. But it takes a while to lose that weight, because why? What would happen? As you lose the weight, you weigh less, right? What happens to your extra energy expenditure that happened when you gain that weight? It becomes less because the backpack just got lighter. And so your body's continuously fighting you to lose that weight. So it's really, really hard. And that's why most people fail to lose weight that they gain. It's so hard because the body fights you. This is a visual graphic of what happens. You can focus on the bottom. The blue represents the fat mass. The green represents the fat-free mass, or your skeletal muscle. What's happening is that skeletal muscles are getting bigger over time as the person is gaining that weight. So we get back to this figure that substrate oxidation, we take fuel and oxygen, produce carbon dioxide and water, and perform work. We have to oxidize fuel to perform that work, and the fuels that we use are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins that are in our diet. When my intro, I talked about diabetes and glucose homeostasis. I want to be a little narrow here and talk just about glucose homeostasis because our introduction was about diabetes. So, how do we figure out how to control our blood sugar? How does our body know that we gain weight and lose weight, that our blood sugar stays relatively constant? You know why we keep our blood sugar normal? Because there's one organ in the body that absolutely requires a normal blood sugar. Can anyone think of it? Does anyone know somebody who has type 1 diabetes? Does anyone know somebody who has diabetes? Anyone here who knows somebody who has diabetes? If you do, raise your hand. You don't have a family member, anyone knows somebody who has diabetes. So what is the most feared thing a person who has diabetes, what is their most feared thing? High blood sugar or low blood sugar? Low blood sugar. Why? Not high blood sugar. Their high blood sugar is the chronic disease that happens and the metabolic consequences long term. But their most fear is low blood sugar. Why? Because low blood sugars means they can't take care of themselves. They faint and fall down. They can't drive a car. Their fear of not being independent. So the lows prevent them from being independent, and no one wants to be dependent on somebody else. So the biggest fear of diabetes is not the hyperglycemia and the long-term complications, because it's not going to happen until tomorrow. Hypoglycemia is something I worry about today. So if you have a friend who has type 1 diabetes, they generally tell you that they have type 1 diabetes, and they usually carry sugar around with them to prevent low blood sugars, and they tell you that they have that sugar so you can help them if they can't help themselves. Okay? And the organ that needs that glucose is the brain. Absolutely requires the glucose. So we have this system in place to preserve our blood sugar in times of starvation and times of eating, in those transitions in life. And we have lots of systems. We have cells that talk to another through gap junctions. We have nerves that use synapses to tell us what to do, we're hungry or not. We have cell-to-cell communication, we call those paracrine signals. And we have endocrine signals, hormones floating in our blood that talk to other cells. I'm going to talk about hormones, specifically endocrine signals, in this part of the lecture, because we have a specific organ called the pancreas, and it's about a kilogram inside, but within that, a small percentage of the specialized cells called the endocrine pancreas that make insulin, a hormone that controls your blood sugar. A person with type 1 diabetes cannot make enough insulin control their blood sugar, so they become hyperglycemic. So insulin's job in life is to keep your blood sugar normal, in normal levels. And there's another group of cells that make glucagon, a hormone that opposes insulin action and tries to raise your blood sugar when it gets too low. So insulin increases in response to eating a meal whenever your blood sugar goes high. And within this little beta cell is a glucose sensor that senses the glucose and goes, oh, make more insulin, oh, make less. Turns on and off, it's really good. A person with diabetes, the physician says, I'm going to give you insulin, or I'm going to give you a drug. Oh, but by the way, I don't have a glucose sensor that works as well as your beta cell. So you only can measure your blood sugar 3 or 4 times a day, which means your blood sugar looks like a roller coaster. Because you can never get it right, because you eat whatever you feel like. And that's the problem. That's why it's so hard to control blood sugars, because this glucose sensor that rapidly can adjust insulin is not working right. And so that's why it's so hard to manage glycemia in this patient population. And the glucagon, the hormone that opposes it, is regulated by nerves going to the cell type, and it generally is responding to low blood sugar and gets stimulated. So let's think about blood sugar. What we have in center here is glucose. It's 90 milligrams per deciliter in this example. The liver makes, in you and I, about 9 grams every hour, pumping out. And most of it's being taken up by the brain. The muscle, in fact, takes up a small percentage. So your brain requires glucose. So what do you think muscle is burning when it's not burning glucose? Your adipose tissue. Fatty acids. The muscle requires fatty acids. That's where most of its energy is coming from. And it's a little bit from carbohydrate, but most of it is coming from the adipose tissue stores. So remember I talked about gestational diabetes. Do you know how we diagnose gestational diabetes? We tell women in their second trimester of pregnancy to drink some sugar. And they monitor their blood sugar at rest, and then a couple hours later, and see if it's still high 2 hours later. It normally should come up and come back down, and that's a normal response. The people with gestational diabetes, their blood sugar could be normal at rest, but goes up, and 2 hours later, it's still high. That's like, uh-oh. The amount of glucose they give is 75 grams of glucose. The liver makes 9 grams per hour, so they're going to give them a lot of glucose. That's a huge Coke equivalent. Huge. Okay? Supersized. So, in you and I, floating around in your blood vessels, is about 14 grams of glucose just sitting there at any moment in time. 9 comes in, 9 leaves, 14 hangs out in the box. And that's how glucose is being flowing around through our body. We're going to come along and ingest 75 grams of glucose. And in you and I, 2 hours later, that blood sugar is going to be back to normal. Boom, back to normal. Our system is so good, we can bring our blood sugar back to normal within probably about 70 or 80 minutes, even though you swallowed a ton of sugar. And that's because this is what happens. That liver that's making 9 grams per hour in the fastest state is going to switch. We're going to take that 75 grams of glucose, we absorb it in about an hour and a half. So that's 50 grams per hour rushing into our body. We're only making 9. The liver, the blood sugar goes up, the liver switches and starts taking up 12 of it. That's a change of 20 grams per hour. Pretty fast. Within 30 minutes, it's already switched to this mode in a healthy person. Skeletal muscle goes from 3 to 30. A change of 29 grams per hour. So the 50 that's coming in is being handled by 2 organs very, very rapidly, very efficiently. And that's why your blood sugar doesn't go through the roof. Because these systems go, oh, it's coming in, insulin goes up, glucagon falls down, and basically brings your blood sugar back quickly. And that's why you can ingest 75 grams of glucose and go home and not have a headache because your blood sugar's been high for 24 hours. So, just I want to know here, if someone were to have diabetes, how would you know? What do you think the clinical presentation would be, all right, if you didn't measure blood sugar? Does anyone know? Excuse me?
And 12 are purity factors.
The what?
The N. The E. The
Oh,
regions, your-
Okay, so you're right. So what happens is the most, if a physician were to ask somebody who just recently got diagnosed, why did you come into the doctor? There's really one of 3 things that happen. Typical for a young person your age is, Doc, I've been eating like a pig, but I'm losing weight. I'm always hungry, but I keep losing weight. I don't understand it. What's happening is they're eating the food, but the calories are spilling out in the urine. They can't keep the calories in. So that's, the glucose has gotten so high that it can't even stay in the body. It doesn't get stored, just one. And then the others say, oh, doctor, I got to get up at 2 in the morning and pee, and then I get at 3, and then I get at 4. It's because it's causing fluid loss from your body. So which is called unexplained weight loss. So that's one. That's a common explanation. Generally, for people my age, that's usually not the presentation. It's usually, Doc, I cut my finger last month, and it still hasn't healed. Why hasn't it healed? Because diabetes prevents natural wound healing. So you don't cure, you don't repair the wound the way it should be. So it hangs around and it gets infected easily. And so those have those presentations. You never knew you had high blood sugar because the body never told you you had high blood sugar. The only way you knew is if you were to measure it. All right? But the body created side effects, what we call complications of the hyperglycemia, that you create symptoms that are clues that you may have diabetes. So this is what should happen is your blood sugar should go up and come right back down in under 2 hours. A diabetic, his basal blood sugar may run high, may not, but when it goes up, it takes a long time to come down. And what determines how well the blood sugar goes up and down is determined by many things, and listed here is a number of them, but for the liver, it's how did you get the glucose in your body? In the hospital, you can give glucose intravenously, or you can drink it like you would naturally do. All right? You make the insulin concentration, how well the beta cell makes insulin is really important. If you don't have it, like type 1 diabetes, it's a problem. In the skeletal muscle, it's how high the blood sugar is. That helps glucose get taken up, as well as how much insulin is available, as well as a bunch of other hormones I won't have time to talk about. So, when we think about effects of insulin on tissues, what it does basically is tell those tissues, get rid of glucose, bring it down to normal. And it can either by telling the muscle to either take up glucose, tell the liver to stop making glucose, brings the blood sugar down. It also tells adipose tissue that stored all those lipids to, hey, hold on to those lipids. I got extra carbs coming along. I need to store that. I don't need the lipid in that skeletal muscle right now. I'll just burn some carbs. So when we think about it then, hormones work by interacting with something called a receptor that says do something. So the more you have, the more you get. So what we have plotted here is insulin versus its effect. It stimulates the body to take glucose and its dose-response curve. You've heard of hormones. They bind to a receptor and tell the cell to do something. Dose-response curve. Here's the liver. The liver's making less glucose as insulin goes up. Makes sense. But the reality is, in you and I, that both are going on at the same time. So if we were to go and draw these curves together, laying on top of one another, here's that 9 grams per hour the body makes and uses. We need about this much insulin, about 10 microunits per ml, to balance what the liver makes here, 9 grams per hour, and the body can use. In is equal to out. That's the point of intersection. In is equal to out. When we have insulin resistance states, when we gain weight, that insulin that we make doesn't work right. There's nothing wrong with the actual molecule, but the cells that are going to listen to that molecule go, I don't care. I don't listen to you. It's like teenagers listen to their parents. I didn't hear them. Okay? Pretend. All right? All right? So, what happens is that the dose-response curve, the effect, is shifted to a new place. The body doesn't listen to the hormone. And the result is that we have new curves that happen. And so, because it doesn't listen, the parent has to yell louder, right, to get your attention. So you have to have more insulin around. And that's all it is. So insulin resistant means, I'll listen to you, but you got to get my attention, like in before. And that's what the body does. It compensates and tries to make extra insulin to get glucose normal. Most people who gain weight are insulin resistant. But most people who gain weight do not become diabetic. 90% of the people who are overweight are not diabetic. Because they can make enough insulin to keep their blood sugar normal, even though the body doesn't want to listen to this. And that's why what we say is that obesity increases the risk of diabetes, but doesn't cause diabetes. That make sense? It increases risk because it's saying you have a system that has to compensate for the failure of the body to listen. And so visually on this, you got to just put X's in the places where insulin needs to talk to the cells. The body doesn't listen. If you have diabetes, normally, if I were to take you and I were to raise your blood sugar, the liver would go, oh, stop making glucose. With people with diabetes, and you measure how much glucose is made by the liver, it's not 9 grams per hour. It's like 13 or 14 grams per hour, even though the blood sugar's high and even though the insulin is high. So they're making extra glucose. The body doesn't need it. It's just the brake. Insulin is going, I'm not listening to that insulin, and the liver's going, here's some more, here's some more. And where does it go? It goes in the urine. You spill it out in your urine. You pee it out. So in the last part of the talk, I want to talk about, so we have this problem. Obesity epidemic, diabetes risk is higher. So what do we do? Well, you're supposed to do the easy things. The first thing the physician's going to tell you is lose some weight. About 10 pounds. That will lower your risk of diabetes if you already have it. And in fact, most people who have just recently gotten diabetes and the blood sugar is just a little high, but it's clearly above the threshold, if they lose 10 pounds, their diabetes disappears. It's not that it's not there anymore. They're no longer hyperglycemia because when they lose weight, that insulin resistance is less severe, and so they can just make X number of moles of insulin, and that's just enough. But when they gain 10 extra pounds, they need X plus Y more, and they can't make that Y. They need that Y, and they can't do it. By losing that weight, they're below that threshold, and their blood sugar's normal. So lifestyle modifications sound great, but it's so hard to do. The second thing they do is avoid smoking. It's interesting in Taiwan, in the US it's a little bit lower, about 18% of adults smoke. Smoking increases your risk of diabetes. So please stay away from it. There's a lot of other things smoking is bad for, but diabetes risk is high. Exercise at least 30 minutes per day. So exercise is one of those interesting things. You don't have to lose weight to benefit from exercise. You do not, let me repeat that, you do not have to lose weight to benefit from exercise. You don't know why, but if you exercise 30 minutes a day, and I'm not just talking about talking on your cell phone, hanging out, I'm talking about going for a purposeful walk, 30 minutes a day, you will lower your risk even if you don't lose a pound of fat that you're trying to get rid of. We believe it lowers the risk by lowering inflammation, but we're not really sure. You're the scientists of the future, you'll figure it out. Remember I talked about sleep? 7 to 8 hours a day. How many people get more than 5 hours of sleep in this room a day? Okay, less than 5 hours of sleep per day. No one's doing it. All right. So sleep, 7 to 8 hours a day is generally the recommended amount. Does anyone here know what sleep apnea is? Do you know what apnea means? You stop breathing. So a person with sleep apnea, which is commonly seen in people who are overweight, if they snore a lot, they get really loud at night, and you listen to them, what you'll have is they'll be breathing, and all of a sudden they stop. And it can last for a whole minute, 2 minutes. And they'll start breathing again. And sometimes it's associated with a snore. That's called sleep apnea. That actually increases your risk of high blood pressure and death.
by itself. And people, especially my age, they use this machine called a CPAP machine. They put a mask on their face when they're sleeping at night and puts pressure on the glottis in the back of the mouth to help minimize it. It works miracles. And I will tell you, people who have sleep apnea, they can't sleep at night because they get so apneic. So they're tired during the day. So tired during the day they could sit at a stoplight and fall asleep and not realize they were waiting at a stoplight. That's really bad. The day they go on that machine, they said, oh wow, so that's what a normal sleep is? They had forgotten what that was. It had been so bad. So machines are magic. So these are called lifestyle modifications, no drugs. But they do work, but hard to sustain. And really very, for a general population, don't work. So we have drugs. Okay? We have drugs that enhance how much insulin you make. We have drugs that make insulin work better. That's called enhancing insulin action. And we also give insulin itself. So type 1 diabetes, those individuals don't make enough insulin endogenously at all, and no matter what drug you give, they can't make insulin, so you have to give them insulin from the outside. So, as I talked about in the very beginning of the lecture, obesity increases risk for diabetes. In population in the US and in Taiwan, the risk of diabetes is higher and going up, associated with an increase in obesity. The questions are, how is this happening and why is this happening? The answer is we don't really know. But scientists are working on it. The questions that come to us are like, why when you gain weight, is your risk for diabetes going up? We call it insulin resistance, but what does that really mean? Because if you don't understand what it really means, how can you design a drug to solve the problem? So it's like, where science now is at a stage where we discover a lot of things, but we don't understand how the story fits together. And that is the big challenge of the future, is we have a lot of facts, but we don't know how to write the story. And it's likely for you, and for you, and for you, the drug that works for you if you do develop diabetes will be different, because you're different. And that is the problem. We don't understand the biology very well. The other thing is genetic risk is very different. Did you notice that in Taiwan, the risk of diabetes from being overweight, you don't have to be overweight a little bit, only be a little bit, and your diabetes risk goes up. So there's a genetic predisposition. We don't understand why. We don't understand how exercise improves metabolic outcomes. We just know that it does. And in a way, we really don't understand why we have complications associated with diabetes. We only know that they do occur and that we can impact them in some ways. But really, the fundamental molecular understanding is still pretty poorly understood, despite what you read in the lay press. So how do we get there? How do you figure it out? We call this translational research. So what translational research is the ability to go from the human to the bench to information about population and compile all that data. So anyone here really good at math? Oh my gosh. There's usually at least one. Okay? How many people here are good with computers? Good. Interesting. Okay? Anyone here really good hand-eye coordination? Oh, wow. Okay, what are you good? Okay, so, oops, sorry. So, in the basic science world, one of the challenges in science is we can go for the basic, we can take population-based. So this would be like, you heard of the word called electronic medical record? So if you go to the doctor, they put information in a computer. That information gets put into a bigger computer.
that what we call de-identified, so they don't know who you are, but they know all your problems, but they don't know who you are. And it's compiled into a whole huge database. But the beauty of that database is now you can mine that data and figure out, oh, when you have these 4 complications, you wind up having that disease. Oh, so now physicians, the computer can flag the physician to go, oh, these 3 things occurring at the same time. Did you check for this? Did you check for that? That's the computer science of the world. The ability to extract information from big databases of data. We need some of those people in the biomedical sciences. We also need the basic scientist who wants to figure out how does a cell look at glycemia and go, oh, I'm going to be abnormal tomorrow and not listen to insulin. How is that happening molecularly? We have some hints, but we really don't know. And then we have the patient-oriented research, which is, for example, going to a clinical trial, we go, oh, we have a new drug, I want to find out if it really works. Or I have a new idea, it works in the mouse, does it really work in the human? That's clinical research. And it all works together to improve human health. And what science is, really, is the ability for people who are interested in how things work, either at the macro level, population, or at the micro level, a little cell, to work together to understand human biology and improve the life of our future generations. So science is fuel for the inquisitive mind, and so we're looking for some inquisitive minds. And thank you for listening. Anyone have any questions or? Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. McGuinness.
Sure.
And I want to know, would you please explain again why sleep is so important to prevent obesity, even the measurement of the extended energy restore?
So the question was, why is sleep important? Well, there's a couple of things. Does anyone here know what circadian rhythms are? Circadian rhythms are that we have a biological clock in our head, and actually in every cell in the body, that tells us when night and day are happening. So every time you eat a meal, when you develop a pattern, you have breakfast at a certain time of day, lunch at a certain time of day, dinner at a certain time, that pattern becomes entrained into your metabolic machinery. We call that's a circadian profile of you. But then your brain has its own circadian profile. I need to sleep, I need to be awake, I need to do things. And these systems talk to one another through genes, transcriptional events. When they get what we call misaligned, a classical way to misalign them is, does anyone have a parent who works the night shift? Anyone work the night shift? Anyone forced to work the night shift? I have. I had a job I worked the night shift in medical records for 2 years as a graduate student. You don't sleep well because you're up at night and then you have to sleep during the day when you don't want to. You feel terrible all the day. Your metabolic machinery, your efficiency for handling machinery is abnormal. But more importantly, think about it from a metabolic point of view. When you develop patterns for metabolism, all the metabolic transcriptional machinery, all the genes that are ready to metabolize the glucose, they're all timed to work together. All of a sudden you're saying, oh, I'm gonna exercise after I just ate a big turkey dinner. Not a good idea. All right? It's that idea that you haven't timed what you ate or what you need to do with the metabolic machinery that's coupled to that. People who exercise regularly try to do it on a regular basis to create patterns. And it teaches your body those patterns that allow you, some days you wake up going, I don't feel like doing anything. But because you have a pattern in your head, it's easy to get yourself going. And once you get going, the pattern helps you through the day. So I hope I answered the question. But this idea that circadian rhythm driven by you, the things and your patterns, and the brain work together to make you metabolically capable. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm wondering why even the insulin is increasing body, but why body isn't stop producing glucose?
Right. So the question is, your body makes insulin, but the body's not listening to the insulin and still makes glucose anyway. Well, the answer is, if you read 100 publications, you get 100 different answers. Okay? That's the truth. What we do know is that it's at least two events that are actually happening. One is that insulin fails at a molecular level to talk to the normal regulatory systems. In other words, you're yelling, the microphone is not working, and so the information doesn't get transduced into the cell to turn on the metabolic machinery. So that's what we call insulin resistance. That is a classic insulin. There's a problem with this guy talking to the cell. But then there's the indirect insulin resistance, which is that cell is listening to a phone call coming from somebody else saying, no, you don't want to take up glucose. You want to do something else. The distractions in life. Well, our endocrine system also has distractions in life that compete. We have hormones floating in our blood. One is example of leptin. Those hormones tell your body to do something different than what you to do. And so those endocrine signals become in conflict. So obesity is not just being overweight, but it changes your endocrine system so that the normal communication, listen to insulin now, listen to him later, is like, no. It's like total cacophony. Everything's hitting at the same time, and you get dysregulation.
And how come the body will become like that when we as a normal person, and after that, like that?
We don't know the answer. So I'll tell you. I'll use two words because the word normal. So the getting overweight is a normal process. The abnormal part of it is the pathophysiology associated with being overweight. The actual being overweight is not a bad thing. And in fact, in primordial times, being overweight was a good thing. Because if there's no food around, the really skinny people didn't do too well. All right? Because they couldn't handle food deprivation, because food was a real difficult resource. The problem is we live in an environment where food, there's plenty of it. Oh, wow, I've been here for 5 days and man, I've eaten too much food. A lot. You have some really good food here. Okay? And I haven't been exercising, so I got a double whammy. Okay. And I haven't been sleeping well, so I got a triple whammy. So the truth is that the biology is really complicated, and I think that's I hope I answered your question, or at least gave you a sense of it. Science is a crazy thing. I started wanting to be an exercise physiologist. That's why I wanted to go. I don't do exercise physiology. I study inflammation and infection. But what I really study is dysregulation of metabolism. Dysregulation means it's not working right. And I really want to understand what causes things to break, to help me understand how they normally work. Because in most biology, okay, how many people here run on treadmills once in a while? All right, run on some kind of athletic device. All right, any kind. Oh, you're all sedentary. Oh boy. So there weren't treadmills when I was a kid. They didn't exist. Okay? All right. We had to run outside. Anyone have athletic shoes? Pretend to exercise? All right. Working on your phone is not exercise. Okay. All right. So patterns, all right, these exercise patterns are part of life and important. In my generation, I should say my parents' generation, we didn't have elevators, they had stairs. And I was raised in New York, So 10 flights of stairs means you walk 10 flights of stairs. All right? I live in Nashville, Tennessee. My building has 8 floors in it. I live on the 8th floor. I try not to use the elevator. I guarantee you that 80% of people your age, if they're going between the first and the second floor, take the elevator. All right? All right? Going up and down. All right? And it's not because it's a social event and you want to meet your friends in the elevator. It's because you develop habits. All right? These are the bad habits, the subtle habits of life that accumulate into good habits. So being purposeful, so I actually have a habit. I developed a new habit that when I come in from work, I do not take the elevator when I'm going to my office and when I leave my office. When I'm hopping to a meeting, middle of the day, I may take the elevator because I'm in a rush. But I shouldn't use the word always, I try my best. I always walk up the 8 flights of stairs in the morning and walk back down at the end of the day. It's the start day and the beginning day. My first car, when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, I used to park all the way in the back of the parking lot, so I had to walk an extra quarter of a mile to get to my car. My wife was not happy because when I go to the mall, I park as far away from the front entrance. She always used to get mad. Anyway, thank you for listening, and have a great day.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. McGuinness, for your wonderful talk. So I think before we end today's seminar, so this is a small ceremony. So our chairperson, Professor Hong, is going to give Dr. McGuinness a gift. So, okay, here we go.
Thank you, and a great talk.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You've been great hosts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck in school. I know some of you have exams coming, so good luck. Right? I like really hard questions. You know, my favorite question on the exam is it A, B, or C, or none of the above? Or even the worst one is, there's not enough information in this question to answer it. Right? Students hate those kind of questions.
Okay, so that ends today's seminar. So if students have any question that you want to ask Dr. McGuinness in person, you can come forward. So anything about Vanderbilt, for example, or about studying in the US, I think Dr. McGuinness will also be very happy to talk to you about those area of questions. So, okay, let's give Dr. McGuinness another round of hands for his wonderful talk.